viewers, good afternoon to you all. Well, Dambisa Moyo, a scholar of economics trained by the University of Zambia, but also the prestigious Oxford University, in her book, rather, Dead Aid, had this to say that, low developed countries, where I believe Uganda falls, experience what she described as a dual economy, that the gap between the rich and the poor is in fact very wide. So today shall put into perspective the socio-economic status of Uganda amidst this very broad and wide inequality between the two groups of people. We have had discussions about whether there is a middle class in Uganda. We shall look into that. But for today, we are here to discuss the socio-economic status of Ugandans vis-a-vis the ever-increasing disparity between the rich and the poor. And to put all this into perspective is a panel of distinguished citizens of this country that it's now my pleasure to introduce to you this afternoon. And in no particular order, the only lady on the show and a face you've seen on this show several times is Dr. Sarah Birete, the Executive Director of Center for Constitutional Governance. Doctor, thank you for sparing the time.
Thank you, Moses, and good afternoon, viewers.
Yes, good afternoon to you too. Next to myself is a face that we have hosted before. That is Dr. Robert Ojambo. Doctor is the head of the Department of History and Political Science at Chambogo University. Daktari, good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kidega.
Yeah, we are very happy to have you. The last panelist on the show is Mr. Muhire Francis, who is an economist but also a lecturer at Makerere University Business School.
Thank you, Moses. Yeah. Good afternoon, dear viewers.
Yeah. And I'll just begin with you, Francis, and just paint first a picture. We are discussing the inequality that exists in Uganda, but just paint for us a more particular picture about what exactly our economic status looks like in Uganda.
Thank you, Moses. When you talk of income inequality, it's a very good, very good topic, and it's a topic that is now actually living not only the low developed economies, but even, low developing economies, but even developed economies, as long as you're practicing capitalism. But maybe that will be a topic for another day. But coming to Uganda, most of the people are saying that maybe it's because of COVID-19, but I want to tell you that even before COVID-19, business was not that different from here. Only that COVID-19 and the other external economic shocks are actually now, uncovering what, most of the people never used to see. But when we talk of inequality, we are simply talking about the gap between the haves and the have-nots, or between the poor and the rich, or maybe the wealth. In the middle, between the rich and the poor, there is always that class, I call it a class of the confused people, what you call the middle income. And if you come to Uganda, you're going to realize that actually you don't have that class. For example, there was a study conducted by Bank of Uganda, and less than 1% of Ugandan, labor force, and just 1 million. We are talking about 1%. So you can get the picture of what we are talking about. But why is it that the gap between those two groups varies from, let's say, one country or from one economy to another? It's all about the allocation of resources for an economy. So when we come to Uganda, the question is, in terms of resource allocation, we are talking about the budget, for example. How do we allocate these resources? I want to tell you that, for example, since, for example, Museveni came into power in 1986, you're going to realize that the per capita expenditure, for example, on key or critical sectors, for inclusive development and growth, has always been, reducing, whether it's education, whether it's health, whether it's agriculture. So if you find that your priorities are more into non-productive sectors within the economy, you are talking about security and governance, of which the governance you're not even seeing, then, talking about the big wage bill, of which doesn't reflect actually if there are this number of people that are getting these kind of salaries. So when you find that resources, the biggest chunk is going into non-productive resources at the expense of productive sectors, then you're going to have a problem. And when we talk of critical sectors, for example, health, education and agriculture. When you go, for example, and interview a common Ugandan, he will tell you much of his income is spent on education, health, and I'm not forgetting about housing, especially in urban centers like Kampala, where most of the people are paying more than 50% of their monthly earnings just on rent. Imagine if you're spending over 50% of your monthly earnings on just housing. So, and these are the basic things we are talking about. When you go to the rural, the rural areas where you have those who are practicing agriculture, they will tell you they're spending much on agricultural inputs. Which agricultural inputs talk about the quality of these agricultural inputs. So even on top of spending too much money on these agricultural inputs, but also the quality is not right. So they are spending much on this kind of course, not forgetting about the high, pocket spending for on health. Because if you go to the public health, infrastructure, you're going to realize there is a problem. So people are spending the little they have on health, education, and agriculture. These are the areas where the government should be allocating resources. That is if you want really to create, to close the gap between the poor and the rich. Of course, the other factor is about the corruption levels we have in this country. I want to challenge Dr. Sarah here. Maybe in the near future we should do a study. When I was young, a child, back in the days in Kabad, every time they would ask us in class, what would you wish to be in the future? All of us would say, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a policeman, because by then a doctor, a policeman at the village setting, you would really feel like they have some money. But today the few pupils have, and I always ask pupils, because it reminds me of how I used to be when I was young. Every time I meet pupils, I ask them, do you know the answers they will tell you? Even at university level, I normally challenge my students, ask them, what do you wish to be? Why are you here? Is this actually, do you wish to be here, or you would have wanted to be in another area? They will tell you, of course, if I wanted to make it, I have to join politics, I have to join, music industry, but most of them, even the pupils, kids in P1, they are telling that they wish to be politicians. So why? Because the message, the signal has been sent to the society, even to the young ones, that if you want to make it in Uganda, you have to be a politician, not a doctor. You're not going to convince the people to become a doctor. No matter how much or what you do, you come up with.
Doctors are on the streets.
You
That's
what I'm heading. No matter what you do, even if you force this kid and you put a gun on his head. Of course, in Uganda, the education policy came in and sciences have been made compulsory. But that is not going to work when the pupils, the students are actually watching doctors, interns, professors, teachers on the streets, always striking for.
Beaten, thrown on the police pickups.
Yes. And when they are seeing the politicians, they have, they have lead cars, they have bodyguards, though now bodyguards have become another different case. So the whole picture is that when you look at, for example, the way we allocate resources in this country, for the last over 30 years, you're going to realize that what you call the government, which I may not call the government, is that it's working mostly for the rich. And this make a very small percentage of the entire population. Yes. So the have-nots have been left on their own.
All right. Well, fair enough. Doctor, I will pick your perspective as well regarding what you think is embodied in our socio-economic status as a country. But also, we are in the budgeting process, and I think Parliament is in the final stages of concluding the next financial year's budget. So when you look at our budgeting and how we allocate resources, is it reflective of a country that aspires to bridge the gap between the rich and the poor? Because, for example, I know that we are investing so much money in the parish development model, which in the eyes of many is seen as taking money to the lowest Ugandan out there. So does our budgeting reflect the need to bridge the gap between the rich and the poor?
President Museveni has been, always, I think he doesn't miss the tagline of socioeconomic transformation as the biggest vision that he bears for this country. And he normally dismisses his opponents that they have no vision. And he's the only Ugandan with a vision. But 37 years without interruption in power, you have a country where I think after COVID, our people living below the poverty line, the number rose from 8.8 million. Every other report now from UBOS, it's increasing and increasing. And given the events in the country, you can only refer to Bobi Wine's song of Time Bomb, where people who work, majority of people in your family who work, cannot meet their ends. So if you compare the salary wage with the minimum requirements for an individual to live a decent life, I think that 60% or more, I'm taking really the lower side, 60% of Uganda's labor force do not even earn 30% of what they need per month through their salaries and wages. So where do they get the 70% from to make ends meet? If you refer to the Bank of Uganda report, indeed, there's a report which states that only 1% earn 1 million and above. Also states that 45% of the labor force earn 250 a month. So you have 50% of the labor force earning untaxable income, because our pay threshold is 235,000. So if you have 45.2% earning 230 and below, they can't even pay pay.
They can't pay.
And that creates a vicious cycle of economic problems for the country. Because taxation should be able to our taxation policy should be able to both empower the citizenry and enable government to raise enough revenue in terms for service delivery. So you raise revenue from the people and provide services that should create social harmony. And that is the basic principle that Singapore used to develop. They termed it as social peace, creating basic services for everybody: decent housing, decent food, decent accommodation, decent schools, decent hospitals. And then you leave now people to aspire to go above the basics, but not to strive to look for the basics. So once you create that social harmony, then you have set the foundation for social transformation in a country. But for 37 years of President Museveni's vision of transforming Uganda, he has failed to create social peace for this country. Just as we talk today, a guard committed suicide on Mukwana Arcade. Every day we have a guard and shooting because of the stress caused by skyrocketing cost of living. People cannot make ends meet. People cannot afford food, housing, treatment for their children, nothing.
Are those challenges in isolation of Uganda? Is Uganda in isolation with grappling with those issues?
No, you can ask. Normally we can look at our neighbors. You look at Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, South Sudan. Are there any low income earners who are committing suicide and on a shooting spree every day? If you go to Tanzania, Tanzania built its foundation on socialism. Socialism comes with basic services for everyone. In Tanzania, you can easily send your children to school. You can easily afford their medicines in public health services. So once you take over the burden of food, education, and health, people can strive for other needs. I'm not going to claim that Tanzania has built houses for the low-income earners, no, but Rwanda has. Rwanda has built houses for the low-income earners, although not everybody, but that's how they got rid of slums in Kigali town, by creating decent accommodation, with the running water, with the electricity for the people that used to occupy the slums, and they occupy those modern houses at the same rate to service the loans that were used. So if you wanted to compare with the neighbors, that's the status in our neighborhood. I know Kenya has been in demonstrations for a high cost of living, saying the price of posho has gone high. But Kenya being a bigger economy, you need to look at, because they have about 45% of their population in middle income, middle and upper income. So you can't compare the level of strife in Kenya with Uganda, where we have about 1% in higher income class, and we have failed to attain middle income class with only 7 districts attaining middle income. So you have Kampala, Wakiso, PG, Mukono, who are the others, Mbarara. There are 7 districts in Uganda in middle income. Jinja with the middle income status and lower middle income. It's only Kampala and Wakiso that can claim to have upper middle income. But also look at the people striving to live in Kampala. People without food. People increasingly begging on the streets. People losing jobs because of high taxation. So our policies are not capable of creating social harmony. If you go to the budget, I was just looking at the supplementary budget passed 2 days ago. And I hope this will be the last for the financial year we are concluding. Because also this government, every week or every month, there is a supplementary budget. So Parliament passed a 4.4 trillion budget 2 days ago. And this is the breakdown. You have 180 million going to Atiak Sugar Factory. You have 620 million going to UPDF. You have 193 million going to State House. And 50 million.
Billion.
Billion. These are billions, sorry. 180 billion going to Atiak. 620 billion State House. No, UPDF. 193 billion State House. 50 billion education. So the only social component in this 4.4 trillion is 50 billion for education. But also education to do what? Education to do what? Does it improve the welfare of the people that offer that service? Or it stops at the technical level? So these are the challenges. If you go to the budget, what is the allocation to agriculture? We have always failed to achieve the minimum 10% for agriculture and health. It's no wonder the medics are on the streets, both juniors and seniors. So when you look at our priorities as a country, there are 2 biggest constants in our budget, and that is security and State House. Just in the budget they passed, they were discussing this morning as I came here. An MP was asking why we need 350 billion for the president's wardrobe. Does his hair celebrity that changes clothes every hour? What is it? So so you look at our priorities. The highest constants are always security and State House. The second question that Parliament was attempting to interrogate is why should State House have classified expenditures? All our neighbors, all countries have State House budgets. But there is no country with classified expenditure under State House. Classified is meant for security, that you don't want to disclose, to put your country in the hands of an enemy. But what should be classified at State House? Why should we have classified budgets at State House? The second issue under debate in Parliament is money for Sudil Ripperia, who is constructing. Every part of Kampala you go in, there is a mushrooming construction site for Sudil Ripperia. He took over doctors' village. As we talk about the welfare of doctors, Sudhiru took over the land for housing for doctors in Murago. I don't know what he's constructing there. As you reach Entebbe, he has encroached on the lake, all sides of the lake, with his recreation facilities, funded by a taxpayer. The last time Sudhiru was given money, we did not achieve any certificate of equity for the investment of a taxpayer. It's like a donation, or it's like Sudhir is holding out for big people in government. that's still money to give to him for their investments. Because why should you give a private investor money when you have doctors on the streets? What are our priorities as a nation?
Doctor,
You
we are
go
speaking
to
about
him.
we are speaking about budgeting. And the
Yes.
people who sit down to petition and to put our priorities out there are in fact politicians. You are a scholar of political science. What's the correlation between politics and the economy? Or politics and economics generally?
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. You see, the diagonizing the situation in Uganda is like giving a doctor to diagnose somebody by imagination. Just look at him and see why he's thin, why is he not talking well. So we don't use the modern systems of diagnosis that will detect. That's why in Uganda, most people die without knowing what has killed them. That's why they resort to witchcraft, to God, and all these things. That they tested everything, and the man was not having any ailment. I tell them, sorry, you just didn't have a diagnosis method that would help you to know that disease. So is the economy. Now, you asked me a question of politics and economics. In simple terms, if you are to define politics, is a process of who gets what, how much, when, and in what quantity. That is politics. Because there would be no need for anybody to govern others if they are not governing them for their well-being. And well-being is only made so by resources. So to begin with, let me just give you a historical background because I come from that background. When the NRM came here, they came with the 10-point program. That was their slogan to convince people. And when you look at the 10-point, you will discover that the economy has about 4 points. 4 points on it, and the others are political and socio-economic in some cases. So people are very glad because we are coming from a very disorganized period of time, which had started in 1966 up to 1980. There was a lot of chaos in the country. So the 10-point program really looked very convincing. In 1996, that's when we had the first election, because the first 6 years were kangaroo leadership. You don't ask questions. It is movement party. I mean, not movement party, but movement system. No question. Everybody is in the movement. Now, in 1996, although in movement, but they allowed people to make choices. So there, the president crafted a very good slogan. Because I was a senior, a Form 6 then. So at Form 6, really, you were very interested in things. He had 3-word slogan: modernization, peace, and unity. Those were the 3 things on his poster, competing with the Dr. Kawanga Semogerere. So many people fell for that because you would see peace. We needed peace so badly. We had come from a chaotic period. You needed to be united because Uganda had been divided into the south and the north. You don't need to mention these other people, but so long as you ask, where does it come from? From the south. What about this one? From the north, your enemies. And Uganda was divided around Karuma there. The whole of this was seen as the south, the other one, the north. So you needed unity, and you also needed the modernization. Now, modernization comes to what we are now talking about. So they had a lot of things in modernization, and that looked like hope for Ugandans. 5 years later, in 2021, of course, he modernized a little bit that slogan, but things did not work.
2001.
And yeah, I mean, 2001, 2016, and up to today. Now, one of the things that would have looked like it was going to help Uganda was the plan for modernization. Because we really thought that we could not improve the gap between, in Uganda, my economist there maybe will correct me. May I normally think in Uganda we don't have rich people. We have the poor and the non-poor. They are not rich, but they are just non-poor because of circumstances. Maybe they're in government. And you have seen when a government falls, they all become poor. Poor people, they even become beggars, some of them. I know an MP in Akawa here who was a very powerful man when he was an MP, but by the time he died, he was even, he couldn't afford the vehicle. He will not mention his name for the security of his descendants. So we have poor and non-poor. And we thought that the only thing that would help us out of this thing was a plan for modernization. Now, plan for modernization was a very huge program. The government decided to choose only one aspect, and that is NADS, to develop agriculture. The marketing part of it, nothing. The promotional part of it, nothing. And the other industrialization part of it, nothing. So this, when you look at all the sloganeering that we get in government, is just to capture gullible people who will be very excited that they are going to be well, but it will not work because you can't develop agriculture without the market, without the science, without the industry, without all those things. So it would not work. So the other thing they did, before I come to resource allocation, they said, okay, the best thing to do for this country is now to have a decentralized government. So they came with a huge project of decentralization. And the argument was that when you decentralize, you take resources nearer to the people. That was the slogan. And many people have been fighting for districts. That has been their catchword. They want resources to come nearer to the people. Now in Uganda, decentralization is only on political leadership. The leaders, LOC 5, LOC 3, LOC what, LOC 10, LOC 3, 2, those ones they will decentralize. But the resources are not decentralized. The resources are all managed by the center. If you compare with Kenya, and I've been arguing with the people that Kenya has a better decentralized mode than ours. Yeah. For them, they have counties. They have 47 counties, and each county is a self-contained county. They have their own budget. They have their own resources in almost all aspects that my colleagues here have been saying, on education, on health, on infrastructure development or road network, and all those things that are important. That's why you see, for example, in Kenya, for some of us who like football, each county has a football stadium. For us here, Uganda does not have a national stadium right now as I speak. They are all defunct. So decentralization. The other one is a shopping mall. So decentralization here was also a gimmick to catch people who are very excited. They go to the positions. For example, now districts are crying. Districts are there with LC5, with the chief administrative officer and all those structures, but they don't have funds to provide services to the people. So having done all this, all the eyes now are at the Parliament of Uganda. Because since the money now is central, we look at the national budget, which is this year it may be 51 or 52 trillion shillings. Now this 52 trillion shillings is supposed to be shared by all the Ugandans, and sometimes people don't know that that is their money. They think it is the president's money. Now, the problem with that, the distribution of the money in Uganda is done at State House. This one I can tell you for a fact. It's done at the State House and for political reasons. And that's why you see, State House is a lodge of beggars.
Doctor, is that according to your opinion or?
It is my opinion, but it is if you investigated it, you will find it is the one.
Because the law says something else. How we budget and how
the beauty in Africa. Yes, the beauty in Africa, what the law says is normally not the practice of the people. In other words, laws are there just maybe to scarecrow and to lull some people. They're like aspirins to deceive people to sleep. Money, and if Parliament was the one, let me come.
Because currently Parliament is discussing and carrying out the budgeting process.
I hope you are following.
It is
The
being
speaker
done.
said the mafias have
I hope you are following.
the budget process.
I hope
by
you are
yesterday,
following. They are bringing it to
statements
Parliament,
approve.
and I said this last time. I disagreed with somebody here that the government appropriates money through the Parliament. No, Parliament is to endorse. That's their work, to endorse. To endorse is to give it a official cover. But the money is distributed in State House. That's why you see State House has become a lodge of beggars. You have to see so and so. You have to see Salim Saleh. Like right now, people who are looking for wage increment or salary increment, you have to speak to MK. And I was wondering, what is MK going to do with our salary? But I later said, oh, that is the way things now happen. So, at the end of the day, they only bring a document in Parliament. I can tell you, they talked about Tanzania, they talked about Kenya. I have been in those countries for professional work. A parliament, a budget cannot pass before going to the Department of Economics in the University of Dar es Salaam, or to Economics Department in the University of Nairobi. They take the thing there and the people discuss, because even for some time, some of the politicians are former professors. So they are very comfortable. They are very comfortable to take the document there and defend it there. And they say, here, my friend, there is a problem. In Uganda, a local man sees a budget. It is like the Torah, the book that was given to Moses, the 10 Commandments. Everybody is eager to see what the budget will be. And yet it should be the people who should be participating in the budget according to the law. According to the law. Yesterday, let me pick up from what my sister here was saying. Yesterday, the speaker was quarreling, literally quarreling in Parliament, because the budget would not be ready yesterday. The budget was supposed to be presented, the report was supposed to be presented yesterday. But they are brokers. They are brokers who have invaded the budget committee of Parliament. Bargaining. In Uganda now, they are brokers. A man comes up, he's very good at talking. He says, I am going to deliver you 350 billion for development in your sector, 20%. And he goes to broker. So, and I'm not saying this because of just things. You know, for us, we don't say things. The speaker herself said it, that brokers have invaded the committee. So tomorrow, I will be there. So is that resource distribution? No, it is brokerage. There is brokerage in the State House. There is brokerage in Ministry of Finance. That's where the budget is really developed, the frame of the budget. Then they bring to my good friends in Parliament only to endorse. And you will even see debates. When the debates begin, I think they have begun. When the debates begin, you will see a few people who know anything about budgeting speaking. Majority of the people will only wait to say, those who say I say it, and those who say nay, then they, a budget has been approved. Is that what you call appropriation? No. So really, there is a huge problem in our country. And for me, I think, if I were to be that doctor, the biggest problem is on governance. You cannot have a good economy with poor governance. And so much so that it is the governance that is supposed to think. You know, I have been asking people, and those who study biology and these other things should tell us, why do trees, after growing, bend downwards? And I asked a biologist, and he said, number one is for symbiosis, to create a forest, to form a canopy and for a forest. But the most important is to protect. The role of our governors is supposed to be to protect the vulnerable people. The president should protect the vulnerable people. The MP should be protecting the vulnerable people. A lecturer like me, my biggest duty is to protect the students. But in Uganda, we do the opposite. We exploit them. So the budget is a bait for votes. in Uganda, where people are told that this year we have put this amount of money for you, so will you support us? And people support. By the end of the day, it is not there. A bait is not supposed to come real. So that is the biggest problem that we have. And the gap is widening every day because our population is increasing. And unfortunately, 70% of our population are young people. They are vulnerable.
Unfortunately, that I think should be a fortunate. I mean, that dividend, if well utilized, can be a great resource to this country.
No, but
No, it can't.
45% of our children, of our population are aged between 0 and 14. So these are pure dependents.
They are really vulnerable.
So you have
people.
50%. This
So they need a very good administrator
14 years.
to plan for them. What do they need? And this has already been said. Those people need very good nutrition. Uganda is one of the countries where there is very poor nutrition, and that is determined by our sizes. Either we are eating badly and we become very obese, or we are too small. One time Uganda was playing football with the Liberia, and the George Weah at that time was the world player, the world best player. So when he came out, he said, they brought us to play with these kids. I thought we were going to play national team. They brought us kids, and for sure they hammered us 3-0 and they went away. So that is one problem. Let me just finish this. Let me just finish this. So nutrition. Many times when we talk about development, we don't talk about nutrition. Many people don't eat. We just eat to live. You eat to live, to be there, to survive. So that affects the economy because it affects the thinking, it affects so many things. Then education. Of course, badly fed kids cannot do very well in education. Then that produces a workforce that is not consummate to the needs of the country. Then you have the health sector to look after their health. Then you have, people say that we are very secure. In fact, I heard somebody on TV saying that Uganda is the most secure country. That is if you are only looking at security as absence of war. But people are very insecure. In homes, people are fighting, on roads. That's why we are very bitter. It's because the economy is very bad.
Wow, thank you. Francis, I have to bring you back in. And as we discuss the inequalities that we have all agreed on this panel, is that could we evaluate this from the point of taking 2 steps backward and look at, for example, the structural adjustment programs that came with aspects of privatization, came with aspects of liberalizing trade, came with aspects of opening up domestic markets for foreign investments. So even when we say today, our education sector is in the hands of private players, our education sector, health sector is in the hands of private players, could this be because of certain decisions we took in the 1980s that are now coming to haunt us?
Thank you, Moses. I want to tell all the viewers out there that when you try to scan and look at all the low developing economies, you're going to pick a good number of countries that have been completely taken over by what I term modern day dictators. Now, this is what happens, and I'm putting that word modern for a reason, because they don't operate like the old dictators, like the way they used to operate. So this is what they have learned. They have tried to scan and see what is good and what is not good, and they are in between, and they are taking advantage of the loopholes within the systems. For example, I'll tell you about democracy. They will tell you we are a democratic country, we have an independent electoral body, elections will come, we spend too much money, people will go to vote. But how are they voting as what we call in economics public choice mechanism? Yeah. How are they making a decision? Are they making a decision based on the fact that they are voting for someone they know that is going to work, for them, or maybe someone has given them something? So that's why you have countries being run by these politicians not leaders. They have designed systems that will benefit them as individuals at the expense of the public. So they have created a system that if you look around, you see this is a government, this is a functioning government, we have a budget, we have a parliament, we have members of parliament. So it is well put, and if you don't dig deep, you'll think, yes, indeed, we have, let's say, a working government. And this is across to many economies, not only the African continent, even when you go to Latin America, you're going to find those same issues. So that's why they will come up. For example, we've talked about structural adjustment program, which was forwarded by the World Bank and IMF. It was a good program with good intentions. Modern day dictators will receive it and say, let's have total liberalization, let's have privatization. Go to privatization. Maybe I wasn't there by then, but how was it? I am able to know what happened because I can read. How was the privatization process in Uganda handled? They will answer later. Then, when we look at, for example, full liberalization of the economy, it's a good thing, but you have to regulate it. And that's where the government comes in. That's where the governance comes in. Because if you let the market operate 100%, then you're going to have the so-called mafias running it when the regulator is sleeping. So I would like to challenge everyone, look at Uganda and other poor economies. By the way, they are poor today not because they don't have potential to become wealthy countries. These are countries which have actually potential to become wealthy countries, even in a space of maybe 2 decades. So you're going to ask yourself, what is happening today? What has been happening? Ask yourself, do we really have a functioning government that works for the public interest? Because number one has to be public interest.
Public interest.
Whether you're talking of the national budget, the number one objective is about, for example, creating job or employment. All the objectives of the budget are to satisfy the public interest. So, but these systems are created, and the end, not only those politicians will take advantage of them, but even have external forces coming in. And now those are even more dangerous, very exploitative. All over the world, you have external forces, and these are individuals, companies, which will come and say, yes, we can take advantage of, let's say, a country like Uganda. That's why today, for example, you have, these investment incentives. The investment incentives scheme, if you put it there in a normal environment, it has good intentions, but will be taken advantage of. That's why you have, companies come here, they get free land, 10-year exemption of tax, they are not paying taxes, and they can be able to take or repatriate all their profits, 100%, take it away. You have, capital inflows, capital outflows, which are not regulated. So after 10 years, if you give me 10 years of tax exemption, after 10 years, or maybe if I'm in my 9th year, I can open another company. So that's why today, as we speak, for example, you have tax GDP ratio at only 13%.
True.
These people who are supposed to be paying tax, they are not paying tax. It is actually the poor that are paying tax. And most of the people think, if you don't pay direct tax, you're not paying tax. In Uganda, we have indirect tax. I mean, they have even now proposed 18% on diapers for the kids and even the elderly, maybe, or the sick. Everyone in this country pays tax. Whether it is a student going to buy a pen, there is a tax. So that's why I told you that these kind of systems only work for a few, not even 1% of the population. And that's, is to answer his question, that do we have the poor and the non-poor? We have the extreme poor. And in the middle, you have a class of the confused people. Yeah, you cannot even call them the middle class.
Yeah.
And that's why maybe most of the civil servants come in, maybe you get your salary, you can be able to struggle here and there. That's a class of confusion. Then you have the other class of the handful. These people don't even go beyond 100 people, human beings. And these are the people who are exploiting this country, but also helping the external individuals and companies exploit this country. I mean, look at the national debt stock we have today. We're talking about over 85 trillion Ugandan shillings. Do these people want to immigrate and leave this country to a
Mortgage
certain
this.
point?
They want to enjoy life in this country.
So, you know, when you look at our economy here, just as you gave that example, if you're to diagnose this economy and make a diagnosis and make a prescription, it needs this entire system to be overhauled. I can tell that you have a system, you have it, you know, the picture feels like, yes, we have a functioning government, everything is going on, but we are going nowhere. And that's why you've started to see certain, you know, indicators that, for example, when you look at people who are committing suicide today, people who are frustrated, hopeless. At the moment, they are killing their bodyguards, but soon they are going to be killing anyone they come across. Because if this kind of situation is not, you know, put stop, and this can only be put stop if you handle the economic crisis. And now is even harder because we're talking about a time when the global economy is actually in total chaos. The other day at MOBS, we had the launch with IMF, giving us the sub-Saharan economic outlook. And they are clearly telling you that there's going to be a funding squeeze, a total funding squeeze. So even where I've been going to get, you know, concession loan or at a low interest rate, the money is not there. Do you know why?
Computing unit.
When you look at the global financial system, there is something going on, and unfortunately, most of the developing economies like us, we tend to not even watch, but we are just there and we see things happening. I want to tell you that, for example, after World War II, that's when 1945, that's when you had World Bank coming in, IMF to rebuild the global economy. And the USA was very strategic because remember during World War II, USA, you know, took much of the time towards a bit neutral.
It was giving loans
Until
to people who are
Japan
fighting.
dragged it into the war. But after World War II, USA was very strategic and invited all the other countries, about 44 nations, and the Soviet Union was one of them. And you know, they convinced everyone that, you know, let's have the US dollar as the global reserve currency. That was during the Bretton Woods conference. And these countries, they accepted whatever they did to, you know, to convince them. No one knows, but they later realized that they had made a mistake. And 25 years after that, Richard Nixon came in because the monetary system or the global financial system was being backed by gold. But they realized that now, if we want to borrow more money, if we want more money, let's say to fund our military, you know, exercises or activities outside even US, or support our budget, we need more money, of which by then under the gold standard, you don't just print money, you have to print money based on the gold amounts you have in terms of reserves. So 1970, they said, no, let's ditch the gold standard. They printed a lot of money. That's why today the US is in a pure debt crisis. And this automatically affects everyone. You've seen BRICS, you've seen other emerging economies. For example, last year in the second quarter, over 35% of gold was bought by central banks and individual investors. Because they have realized where we are heading, we might go back to the gold standard. You have the US and the debt crisis. You know, they have always been, you know, shifting their debt ceiling. Even in January this year, their debt ceiling was hit, and now they're discussing whether we should raise it. But you know, you raise that at a very high cost. So, how much, for example, Uganda how much gold are we, you know, saving for ourselves?
Just add to us something.
Yeah.
So the USA is indebted to who exactly? To the same institutions like World Bank and IMF?
When you look at US's, for example, you know, government securities, you're going to find that, for example, China is the biggest, you know, creditor, and other individual investors who invest actually in these government securities. But I'm trying to bring out this because while we have, for example, issues back home, Or while, for example, we've been vulnerable to external shocks, whether Ukraine-Russian war or the COVID-19 being hit more than even other economies, just like other, struggling, low-developing economies, is that if we've been asleep, especially our politicians, not leaders, I don't want to call them leaders, where we are heading, it is even to get tough. You look for where you can borrow the money from, even the high expensive or with high interest rate, you will not get the money. Because we've seen, for example, China also indicating that I may not be lending to poor countries. You have individual investors selling stake of their companies. Everyone is trying to invest in gold. The other day, Warren Buffett sold about 54% of his stake in his companies. You think he's keeping the cash? He's stocking gold. That's why everyone is rushing to. So why do we have all these challenges if our politicians don't wake up? Because what we have in Uganda, it's already chaos, only that most of the people are not seeing it. If I asked you who is an analyst and I tell you that, tell me the picture where Uganda is going to be in about 5 years. For example, just given what is happening today, everyone who has an access to a gun, if you see them, you want to run away. So I'm telling you, where we are heading, it is going to be total chaos. And when it is a global problem, I want to take you to, for example, when we had COVID-19, outbreak in the first phase, you saw how countries were, nationalizing, trying to get COVID for themselves, COVID vaccines for themselves. Now, the economic crisis that is likely to happen if we have this financial system getting overturned or maybe going back to the gold standard is that everyone is trying to be self-reliant. And most of these big economies are already seeing it. So our politicians here have to wake up. It's not on even just being about them is not going to be enough. They will not have where to run to. And here we are.
I agree with you. It will take concerted but also collective efforts for us to address this economic crisis. Well, we are due for a short commercial break, and Doctor will begin with you right after that. But for now, the viewers, let's take a short commercial break. There's a comment section right below this YouTube video. Just put your comments right there. If you agree or disagree with any of us here, let us know. But above all, just see you shortly after this.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
We'll be back from that short commercial break. Doctor, as we discuss the economy, let's put in the social aspect as well. This month happens to be the Mental Health Awareness Month, but also we have seen rising cases of gun violence in the country. Issues around teenage pregnancies and gender-based violence still continue to haunt this country. Now, whereas those are social, I believe they also play a role in terms of how the economy eventually is built, because someone whose mental health status is in question, then even their productivity is going to be, affected. So I don't know, in the wake of gun violence, in the wake of all these mental health issues, how are we as a country dealing with issues, for example, like mental health? We have mentioned earlier on the aspect of the gun violence that we are seeing. All these, I believe, are aspects that are social in nature but have a broader implication on how the country moves. So as we still discuss the economy, the social aspect as well is important. How is it looking like for us as a country?
Maybe to begin with, you see economic transformation, where our economist has demonstrated clearly how it has failed. Economic transformation is supposed to change the social life of citizens by determining what they are in terms of professions or jobs, what they do, how they do it, and from where. So once you have, you know, the circle, the knitted circle of the country, where you have the economic transformation that has failed clearly. Because if you look at the haves and have-nots, you don't need to even do any study. You were talking of a study. Just take a walk around. Observe. There are people who are walking on the roads, and you see people in deep thought. And that also explains the rising accidents away from our bad marak, like doctors, a mixture of maram and tamak. But a lot of accidents are caused by stress. A mind that is deep in thought, and then before you realize you've gone off the road. Or even insufficient sleep, or these other issues that really impact on a person's state of well-being. Look at our housing. You pass, I even feel sorry for the rich people, because you jump from a very posh house to a slum, to a, you know, and you can't compare, for example, with the Westlands, with those organized housing estates in Nairobi. You can't. In Nairobi, you have gone to a part, even a slum is organized. Even a middle class, you know, emerging posh area is organized. The posh areas are organized, clearly distinct. We do not have. Even in Kororo, which seems to have, there are patches of this and that amidst Kororo and Naguru, which are really the most, you know, luxurious places to stay in. So you are even, like, I think the rich people are the most endangered. But we have run an economy under NRM that is a corrupt enterprise. So you look at people who have money. The percentage of people who have money that have not got it from a taxpayer cannot even count to 10. 1, 2, 3, up to 10. So we don't even need to go to percentages. You can only bring out people like Ovamunu, Murwana, and a few other families. The rest have stolen the citizens' money. It's what have made them what they are. Like the things Sudir is doing with the government. Like the deals Rocco is doing with the government. So these other people we think have money, have people's money. And that's what will escalate the anger. Because what is the source of your richness? It is, I'm poor, you are rich because I'm poor. Kind of society that we have created. So, I mean, you can't name 10 people in Uganda that have money away from a taxpayer. You can't. I have only named 2. You can add the Sekarara family. You can't name 5 people that have made money without using taxpayers' money. They don't exist. So even the so-called billionaires, no wonder after elections, they run to a taxpayer for bailouts. We have funded your election and now fund our business, kind of thing. So that this is how we've been running the prosperity slogan here in Uganda Museveni. You go to the other people, the politicians. Recently, I talked about, you know, our taxation policies. You know, we are taxing a small portion of formal employed people. Of course, we have a thrust of indirect taxes that everybody pays. But how many people pay direct taxation? It is the 1% who earn 1 million and above. They are paying the biggest thrust of direct taxes. Then every day, Parliament is passing new taxes to the same small proportion of people. So even when you could say that the doctor here maybe is in stable employment as an academia. But how much money does he take home? Because I'm seated between academicians. How much money? On indirect taxes, you have 30% pay. There is a proposal to even tax savings. There is we have a digital service tax 5%. You have all these taxes are coming to the same type of people. 18% on diapers. People who don't use diapers are way outside this taxation that we are talking about. They will only pay tax when they are buying. We have about 68% population that pay tax when they are buying soap. What else do they consume? Sugar is consumed on Christmas. This is the majority of the population. So recently I proposed a tax on cows because I come from a cow region and I know how much cows cost. You are taxing a person earning 1 million, they pay 30% pay. But when I sell my cow at 3 or 5 million, I don't pay anything to government. And then the cattle farmers use an excuse that we pay on indirect taxes, agricultural inputs. Indeed. But how about a former employed person? Don't you pay tax as you buy clothes? Don't you pay tax as you buy fuel? Don't you pay tax as you do whatever you do to enable you to come to work? So it's the same thing. But who do we tax? But because of the leadership, now when you talk about cow tax, it's like you are attacking a certain category of people. Yet that's where income is. Recently, the minister sold the cows each at 10 million. A lot of cows. I will not name the person. How much income is that? Tax-free. All they need is a movement permit, which is 20,000. And maybe if they are in a market dues are 7,000. That is all. But you earn 1 million, the 1%, you must do away with your 30% and take home 700,000. Because 30% has gone to URA. Then out of 700,000, you will buy fuel, you will buy food, you will buy whatever you need to buy, and there are taxes on those commodities. So this is part of the problem why we don't have the middle class. You call them what? The confused.
Confused.
Because of this regime of taxation, you can't even, a middle class cannot emerge. When you come to the biggest thrust of the people, you don't know the struggles people go through. Recently, I posted on Twitter for people to mention what service they get from government. Ideally, we would get public roads and security because the rest of the services hardly exist. Murago, they will tell you the machines we bought, some of them parts are being stolen. The doctors have said. So then you see in the budget money for a fake doctor to make vaccines. The one who said they make vaccines of a mosquito, whatever, which was like sanitized. He's in the budget. But in Danes are on the streets. So what are our priorities as a country? How can you socially develop or create a meaningful economy to develop the country? We tried to smuggle ourselves into middle income status. Things failed. I think we have given up now. But if you look at our debt burden, which is now official at 52%, but people say it could be about 60%, except we still want to look good in terms of figures. But what are we borrowing to do? Parliament is struggling with a budget. A budget which was 51 trillion, there is now an increment from nowhere of 1.5 trillion in that budget. But does it come to a taxpayer? Does it help the biggest people? Does it create social harmony? None of the above. You'll find things like a manufacturer of a vaccine. They've put money for COVID. I don't know whether we still have COVID or whether it cannot be handled under the general health budget and we need to budget for it as a single disease, or whether that is not money for direct steering. So under these circumstances, how do you develop?
It's a bit difficult indeed. Doctor, Mwalimu Julius Nyerere attempted to build Tanzania's economy on a sociological principle or policy of Ujamaa. So, and the social fabric is very important, that if you have a people that have a strong social cohesion, certain things can begin to fall in place. So, and that's why we should discuss, as we evaluate the economy, what is our social fabric as a country? Does someone, okay, when floods happen in, for example, Katonga, does me who come from Gulu, do I feel the pain of those Ugandans? Or it is a Katonga affair? All right. When issues happen in maybe Bududa, is it their issue, or even me who comes from Kasese? I feel part of that, part of that pain. So the social fabric on which our country is built, does it have capacity to hold us together?
Yeah, people have written a PhD thesis on how Ujamaa policy failed, and they have become doctors, and others are professors right now. But when you read their thesis, you don't find an answer why Tanzanians have remained a nation.
Yeah.
They don't answer that. Yes, the Ujamaa policy might have failed to bring flyovers, to bring high-tech hospitals and so many big things that people are imagining. But Ujamaa policy managed to create a nation in Tanzania. And for that purpose, that's why you see among all the East African countries, Tanzanians are quite different from the other people. They will do things as Tanzanians, and that's how they managed to match here with the not even soldiers. You will be surprised. The people who took over Amin were not soldiers.
Yeah, but the spirit.
There is no way Nyerere would risk his soldiers to come here to remove. They were just, in Kiswahili, they were called Mugambo, mchaka characters. Who were mobilized with a few soldiers, and they came here. But because of that zeal of working together, working for their country, they managed. And it has helped in a big deal.
Can I just supplement something?
Yes.
Yeah, just sorry to cut you short. But, and you make a very substantive point, because think about it in this way. I come from, say, Acholi or Gulu, and I have grown my cassava. If I cannot communicate to you who comes from Mbarara in a local dialect, and we have to use English to communicate, I am going to have an issue selling to you my cassava.
True.
So Mwalimu Julius Nyerere built a nation whereby even trade within intertrade is actually quite simple. But here, to sell a product from one part of the country to another, it's either you're using English, or if you can't speak English, then it
I want to proceed by saying that that nation created some system that is different from these other African countries. Of course, when his successor came, he tried to change a few things. That's the time when IMF and World Bank was coming in. But the person who really hit Ujamaa terribly was Benjamin Mkapa. And by the time Nyerere died, they had a lot of disagreement with the Benjamin Mkapa, because Nyerere was asking simple questions, and I want to start from where he began from, privatization. Nyerere would ask a question: why do you privatize an industry which is making profit? It is buying raw materials, it is employing Tanzanians, it is producing and making a profit. Why do you sell it? So that you get what? That because you want, what do you want to get from it? The people are paying taxes, it is paying taxes, and you're still making a profit. And he really had a big quarrel. And of course, later when Benjamin Mkapa finished his term, it was one time in a conference where he was the speaker, and somebody asked him a question to tell the audience one mistake that he might have made as a president of Tanzania. And I looked at a very honest old man, said the biggest mistake we made in Tanzania was privatization without supervision. We privatized everything, and we thought that now we left the economy to the private hands. We were not supervising them well, and now we are in trouble because people had, and that's what happened in Uganda here. In 1994, when they passed that law and you see, at that time, at least, we still had a semblance of a parliament. Parliament almost failed that law to pass. Almost, but because of the forces of IMF and World Bank, they marveled them and they managed them. Now, for us, we looked for all the companies that were helping Ugandans, the local person. Sometimes people wonder why Ginger has collapsed. Ginger has collapsed because the industries that were there have all collapsed because they were all privatized.
But did we privatize? Or
That's where I'm coming, madam. Yeah. So ours, and I need people who are writing syllabi to really change this. What happened in Uganda was not privatization. Later turned into grabatization, where powers, people who had power, grabbed everything in the name of privatization. And because they were not able, they were not businessmen, they were not supervised, most of those companies, I want somebody to list them, collapsed. Nightil, Uguma, Kazimingi, all of them collapsed. Uganda Airline, they all collapsed because they had been grabbed.
Uganda Commercial Bank.
Uganda Commercial Bank is, has not collapsed. There is this thing from South Africa, Stanbic, but many of them collapsed. Many of them collapsed. And you will find that entities that were not fully privatized are still there. They may have challenges, but they are doing well. An example is National Water and Sewerage Corporation. Yes, it has some elements of privatization, but government still supervised it, and it is one of the good, although with the challenges being in a bad governance area. So for me, I really think that number one, you would need the only thing that would bring people to becoming Ugandans are those social services that I was talking about. For example, these people who are now leading us, and some of them who have retired, did not bother which school they went to. They were very sure that if you went to any school and you were a student and you are good, you will pass. Yeah. So they would go to Sir Samuel Baker, they pass. They go to Nabumari, they pass. They go to Teso College, they pass. And that's why you saw people crossing. I've said this severally here. If you met the later Ronda Nyakairima and you spoke Acholi, he would challenge you in Acholi because he spent most of his early childhood age in Kitugum, studying there. If you challenged, for example, our very good friend Norbert Mao in Lusoga, you will be in trouble because he studied his early age in Wairaka College. He only came to Namiriango later, and so many others. So that was helping the country to unite, so that now these days, you have a situation. I normally give this example, and your name being Kidega, please forgive me. There is a person who is born in Gulu. He studies in Gulu Primary School or Peche Primary School. He goes to Gulu High. He goes to Gulu University. He works in Gulu Hospital. You can imagine such a person. He knows, the only thing he knows about Uganda is Gulu. And it goes everywhere in our country. That's why you see now each district, each village is asking for a university so that they can be self-contained. But those days you didn't need that. You would go to Chigezi College and you study from there. And the beauty with this, all those schools now are collapsing for pseudo things which call themselves schools. So that is number one. Number two, the other thing that can bring people together is transport and telecommunication. You remember those days it was very easy for somebody to move from Tororo to Gulu by train, or from Gulu to Tororo, to Kasese by train. And that movement, although these days people say, oh, there are so many highways and people can cross, but people are not moving because it is very expensive and risky. to move in those things. So you find a person who has been born in Luwero and he has never left Luwero until when he's buried in Luwero. So you can't create a cohesive country.
Social cohesion.
Now, the other issue is healthcare. Healthcare. And that's why you see, for example, these born again churches are growing like bushfire. Because we have a poor health system. Now, every pastor, you must have a healing ability. These pastors of Uganda now are like Jesus. All of them, they have healing ability. And the more power to heal you have, the bigger the church you will be. Because our health system has collapsed. Somebody is taken to hospital, he has or she has cancer. To be tested, only to be tested, you need an average of a year to be tested to see whether you have cancer at the Cancer Institute in Makerere, in Mulago. You need a year. They book you for a year. So why won't you go to a witch doctor? Now, the people start feel the Ugandanness in you keeps dying. If the country cannot help you, now why should you be a Ugandan? You need to struggle with your brother, with your nephew, with your uncle, so that so long as you're okay as a clan or a tribe, you are fine, you're okay. And that's why when they're giving ministries, people are looking. How many from my place have been given? Some of us who are small communities, you check in the list, you are not there, you say we are finished. But because the country has collapsed, there's a time when the Minister of Education was from my place. So I asked him, you man, you are a Minister of Education. What do I benefit from you? He was very angry. He said, what do you want me to do? I said, but you are not constructing schools. I'm a teacher. I would want where to teach. They say, but we are constructing schools in Gulu. I say, okay, you are constructing in Gulu. How come in my village? How come we don't have? So you need a program, and the only things that would unite us in that is education, health,
The social services.
the social services. Those are the things that can help us. Then the other big issue is the theft that has developed in the country. Maybe she's a lawyer. She calls it corruption. What is here now is broad day theft, where people just steal. And I was telling people that I saw people excited when this Mabati saga came, and they were taking people to write statements and take them to Luzira for a night or two. Let me tell you, in public service, when you are taken to court and charged and presented before the judge and charged, you are supposed to step aside by law if you're a public servant. But now, these people have created a precedence. A minister is charged, he has a case to answer. The court pronounces that you have a case to answer. And they are saying, please come back and answer. And the man still goes to Parliament of Uganda as a minister. So how are you going to
present the budget?
How are you going to talk about a cow in the future? Because we need to build a moral state. You know, laws are good, but laws must be supported by ethics, and values. So the value system in the country has collapsed. People are stealing from like the other day. I was hearing that somebody had constructed a house, makeshift house, timing that the next thing were goats were coming, so that he puts them there. And the people asking, what's wrong with that? Really, there is everything wrong.
Yeah.
So when you have our leaders as thieves, it is very difficult for us to build the economy and bridge the gap, because thieves are normally people who take other people's things without their consent. They are thieves.
That's true. They deprive the bona fide owners of property. Francis, as we wrap this up, our debt burden. We have all mentioned the figure here. And one time I listened to a Bank of Uganda official who said that part of the solutions to our debt crisis could be if we eventually get the oil out of the ground. So I don't know. Do you think what do you think are the possible solutions towards our debt burden? That's one. Two is As we speak about economics, the aspect of market for our produce becomes very important. With the fluidity of or insecurity that the region finds itself grappling with, you know, Sudan is at conflict, you know, DRC and many other countries within the region who should have been potential markets for our commodities are at conflict. So where does the aspect of insecurity in the region leave a place for our commodities and market?
Thank you, Moses. Debt. There's one or more motivation why this debt has actually grown up to the level it is today. And just as we put it, the appetite for debt has been increasing, on the assumption that one, we are going to get oil out. Now, when you talk of oil, this is a global product. This is a product where you might be having oil, but you don't have a say in the price of this product you're talking about. You know, this is a product that is used on the global market as a weapon. This is a product you're talking about
A weapon.
as a global weapon. We'll
Weapon,
call it
yes.
economic weapon on the global stage. This is a product that can only be priced in a US dollar, called the global reserve currency or the petrodollar, though we've seen forces trying to go away from there. So I'm trying to show you that you cannot count on things like oil. I mean, you haven't got it out of there. Why? You have, external forces saying, we are trying to transit to cleaner, energy sources. So the other motivation why you have this too much debt, of course, is corruption. The appetite is too much. So you have corruption rising and also the debt rising. That's why most of the borrowed resources are not, you cannot, get the value for money that has been borrowed. Then the other motivation is hope that will be forgiven this debt at the end of the day. Because it has happened, you know when it happened, and immediately we are forgiven that debt, you saw the rate at which it is increasing. So what are the solutions? It is simple. We need an overhaul. We need, for example, public sector reform. Because, for example, when we look at our current, expenditure, I understand the Ministry of Finance finally have come up to do head counting, for example, to track the number of civil servants, because, there is, or they suspect there are so many ghost workers. So you have a lot of money that is going where you cannot even explain. Then the other solution, of course, is now to start reducing the amount of money we are borrowing. When you look at the budget, for example, as we talk about 52.7 trillion shillings, there is no money. We are hoping that we are going to borrow and also maybe collect a little from our economy in form of tax. So the question is, are we going to continue living like this? When you're heavily indebted like the way we are today, you're not independent. You might think we got independence in 1962, but we are not. That's why some of the debates we have in the parliament, like, for example, homosexuality bill, that's why it will not see the light at the end of the day. It is going to come back as it did. You are not independent because you cannot make a decision. There are external forces coming in. So the solution is that we have to cut our appetite for expenditure, but also fight corruption. Now, where are we going to get the resources then? When look, for example, at our mining sector, how much is the mining sector contributing to GDP? You're talking about only 4%. This is an area where we should be trying to capitalize. Talk about gold, for example. We have about the tax rate on gold, if you're exporting, let's say 1 kilogram of gold, which is worth 55,000 US dollar. The tax imposed on that 1 kilogram is 1%. Initially, what was proposed was actually 0.5%, which was total under taxation and was increased to 1%, and still is under taxation.
Yes.
And we started taxing or getting tax from gold just last financial year. So you can imagine for the whole so many years in the past, we've not been getting any tax on gold.
It's because of who controls.
Exactly. So
The
you
business.
have the president who has been convinced that, with gold, we don't have to put tax on it because we're going to chase away investors. Investors will always come as long as you have something they want. So you have where, as a country, we have, our strength, our opportunity. Instead of capitalizing like on the mining sector, we are not doing that. And of course, talking about this investment, incentive scheme which has been misused, I can assure you that if you want to attract legit or genuine investors, just build strong institutions. And we're talking about fighting corruption. Of course, I'm not saying that you have to fight it to zero levels, but at least fight the levels of corruption, not the level we have today. That's why these investment incentives like tax exemption mostly is going to attract those investors. The Baganda call them Musiga Nsimbi, naye nga tebalina nsimbi. What kind of investor that is going to invest in the economy without money? He's talking about,
They come to take.
and instead the government is the one actually giving them money or getting them loans. So we can get money from our economy if we tax the right entities. The right people should pay tax and also reduce our appetite. You see, when you look at the government size today, is too huge and is expensive.
And they're not doing so much.
And that's why when we try to look for the value this government is in terms of the size, I mean, we are talking about, for example, the poor supervision in the agriculture sector. The farmers are buying fake but expensive agricultural inputs. And now the government has said, no, we have Ministry of Agriculture, but let's create another arm that should look into this. It's about embracing merit. We lack meritocracy in this country. If you have inefficiency, no matter how many people you recruit, no matter the big size of government you have, still output is going to be very low because there are high levels of inefficiency. But this goes to the quality of governance. We said that the biggest budget resources go to military security. I don't want to call it security because security covers a lot of things. Food security. So you're talking about biggest chunk of resources going to military security and governance, of which we are not seeing the quality of governance, trying to, get things right done. So the quality of governance you have is what will determine whether the country will make another step or not. The quality of governance. And this is to do with policymakers. These are the people that will make decisions at the end of the day. Even if you have technocrats who know what to be done, at the end of the day, the politicians are the ones who make decisions. That's why these kind of economies that have been captured by modern day dictatorship, everyone will be telling you orders from above, technocrats orders from above. You have MPs, most of them, they don't know what they are doing. So the chaos we have in this country, the crisis, call it the cancer, all we need to solve it. You can list all the problems and I give you policy recommendation or solution according to each. But the major thing we need to pray for this country is to have high quality governance. That's why she talked of a country like Singapore. Singapore was just like a fishing island. They don't have resources like we have in Uganda or other developing economies on this continent. But the quality of governance. Lee Kuan Yew, what had to do was make sure that he embraces meritocracy. Put the right people in the jobs, and the job will be done. Talking about the high population, the youthful population you have today, how much productive is it? The last time I checked, maybe the best you can do is on average 35%. You just imagine. So all we need is high quality in terms of governance. And that will bring the public interest as the number one priority, and we'll get rid of this.
Yeah, I agree with you. Many things begin and fall with leadership. Doctor, we have about 6 minutes to be out of here. So as we take our parting shots, I don't know, how insecure do you feel? He mentioned earlier on that, these days seeing someone holding a gun, you don't feel very secure being around them. So as we wrap this up, Doctor, just away from our conversation, is the issue of gun violence. Personally, it worries me. I don't know how secure and safe you feel, but every single day you see news of either someone has been shot. I don't know. It's a bit worrying. So, as we conclude this, Doctor, what do you make of this increasing gun violence, and what could be the cause, and how can we deal with it as a country?
Well, in my view, I think it's caused by two things. The first one is the fact that violence begets violence, or begets more violence. We have witnessed about 15 years of constant state brutality against people who don't support them. The state kills, state shoots into other political people with a different political thought, whom they term as political opponents, and there are no repercussions. There is no cause of justice. Instead, the soldiers and police who shoot at opposition are rewarded with promotions. So the state over time has created a reward system for brutality and a sort of politics using bullets. You can use an example of the just concluded elections. Do we have any punishment for people who shot Ugandans on Kampala streets? Official statistics is 54, according to police, that were shot dead. An official put the number at about 150. No single police officer or army man has been punished. So if the state solves the regime, let me not call it the state, the regime solves political arguments using bullets, what are you teaching society? Why can't a junior police officer shoot a man when they argue? What have you taught society as a standard over time? It's brutality. It is solving questions with bullets. So now the guards have taken arguments, contestations, disagreements, discontent. They've used the state method of bullets. And we are all up in arms. Why didn't we come to arms when the state was shooting its opponents, which they do on a daily basis? Your parents can call you. You are lucky you are not in people power. If you are in people power, you put on a beret. Your parents will call you and say, "You child, you want to die and cause us problems." Who kills those people? It is the regime with no repercussions. That's when gun violence started in this country, by the state shooting its opponents. What we are harvesting are the results of that brutality, the results of that violence. And now with the economic stress, it's the trigger only to the standard that Museveni's government has set of killing opponents in cold blood.
Doctor, your parting shots regarding today's topic, but also your opinion regarding gun violence.
Yeah, I agree with her that violence begets violence, and in a country where people think that when you have any form of power, you are bigger than others, and therefore they should not say anything about you, creates a very big problem. The analogy of we shall crush them. If you have a leader, although my colleague has refused to call them leaders, let me continue calling them pseudo leaders. If you have a leader whose vocabulary is that we shall crush them, and the people are hearing, they are growing when they are hearing that if you don't agree with somebody, the only way you can solve that problem is to crush them, then we have a very big problem. Somebody talked, she talked about the mental health crisis in Uganda. And that is not, it's just that mental health is not a very serious thing and people don't even want to associate with it. So that when somebody has a mental problem, it's even hidden, it's looked at as something that is abnormal. Just look at our healthcare system. How many hospitals can handle mental health? Diagnose it, treat it, and rehabilitate if possible. people know that when they take you to Butabika, you have run mad. And yet we have only one Butabika with a few areas, referrals, maybe like Jinja, Mbarara, and just small places. So many of us have mental health issues, but there is nobody to help these people to get back to normal situation. Because mental health is just like when a car gets a problem. We repair it. So in Uganda, because of the stress, so that is one solution is to make sure that that area, you know, and Mutabika is the way it is because of donor support. Because Mutabika is much of it is free unless you want specialized care. So how much of that can be done in other many parts of the country? A big problem. Then the other issue, which is causing a lot of havoc in Uganda, is creating clusters of human beings. They are command posts. For example, right now there is a command post of the president. There is
headquarters.
Then there is another command post that has, in fact, command posts that have broken out of the president. There is a command post of the in-laws, there is a command post of the son, and a command post of the daughters. So if you attack any of those people, you are in trouble. So even these people killing each other on the street, we don't know who is sending them. We may think maybe they are coming from those command posts. We don't know. We need to investigate. Now, in the society also, there are powerful people. You see, when Chitata was caning people here, people thought it was a joke. In fact, Kakoza Mtale is the one who started this public caning of people.
Yeah.
Early 90s.
Who don't support
Kakoza Mtale. You know, in Uganda is a very unique country, and you are the one who was talking about law. In Uganda, you are not supposed to give any corporal punishment is against the law. So in schools now, for us teachers, we are not allowed to cane pupils and students. But these students get amazed when they see their fathers and mothers and big brothers being caned on the street, caned and bundled into a vehicle. You just imagine.
Recently, we are MPs.
You can imagine.
Beaten.
These are 10 MPs whom you can come with the serious barricades and bodyguards and you round them and you say you are not going anywhere.
Yeah.
But they are being carried as if they are, even goats are not supposed to be treated like that. So we are creating a violent society when the children see, because these people who are being violent. I had my son, Bwire, the father is called Ojambo, by the way, is 30. The other one who shot the minister must be around the same age. The one who shot the other people, we are yet to know. They arrested some Muslims. Those ones, they arrested some Muslims. They have not yet told us who they are. So these are young people. In most cases, they are young people. So these young people in 30s, in 20s, in 50s have grown up in violence. So the best thing they need is rehabilitation. The first thing that would have rehabilitated them would have been education. We have universal primary education, which is in itself violent. So, and so many other problems. So I think we have to go back to where he you know, like athletics. Athletics, I like that game so much that when there is a false start,
You go back
you must begin
to
again.
the start.
If you allow a false start to go, somebody is going to win a medal wrongly. So we need to go back. And we had hope in the chairman of the president of DP, who had bargained that thing, and he was bringing that reconciliation and people talking so that we have a new beginning in the country. These days he's speaking a different language. His type of reconciliation that he's now talking about, we don't understand. In other words, we want a Uganda where everybody can be listened to. For example, right now, when I talk, somebody is going to ask me, Ogunoha. Who is this one talking? So when you ask me who I am, and I get access of a gun, then I'm going to show you who I am. So people should be listened to. And anybody who is pushing people to the wall, This business of thinking that the only way you can manage your position is by restricting them, making sure that they don't move. As I end, for example, shows in Kampala were creating a lot of money for young musicians. Young musicians were making a lot of money from shows, these shows singing here and there. And the musicians, we have started admiring musicians. Now, because one of the musicians became a politician, shows have been closed. They don't want them.
They can only
If they have them, it is only for supporters of
government.
the regime
Yes.
who are very unpopular. So wherever there is a show in Lugogo, stones are being pelted at the musician. So they have become very unpopular. Now, what is the government doing? I heard the other day that they are giving musicians, they have formed some pseudo association, 70 billion shillings to sing for Ugandans. And I was wondering, now, are they going to sing and we listen? What is
for the hungry people?
So my brother, what has happened to that thing? Nobody even wants to listen to their songs because what they sing is bogus. Somebody I heard the other day, somebody stealing a song from a Tanzanian who sang for Magufuli and he puts there Museveni. On everywhere there is Magufuli, he puts Museveni. So who is going to listen to that stupid thing? So in my view, I really think that we need to go back to the drawing board or the starting point, and everybody should be listened to, however stupid they are, tolerated. Those who are criminals, we know where to take them, but bundling everybody and thinking that you are going to herd us like sheep is quite difficult.
Yes, Doctor, you have the final say.
Thank you, Moses. Just as I've said that we need a complete overhaul of this system. And the best we can do is to pray for this because if people are not being listened because you know, if people are not listened to, because, you know, people have been talking. And at the end of the day, you don't see any change because it starts with the will. And the will comes when you have that good quality in terms of governance. So just as I said that you can list all the economic issues we have and I can attach a specific solution. But it is not going to work in this kind of environment that has been built without any interruption for the last 37 years. We need to go back to the drawing board and, you know, make that overhaul and start afresh. Yes, that is the only way. That's the only solution.
We must begin all over. Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Ojambo, Dr. Sarah, and of course, Francis, for your time, and thank you for, you know, being on this show. To the viewers, it's always lovely having you every single Friday afternoon, and thank you for making and sparing the time to be with us. So until next week, same time, same place, have a lovely afternoon.